In CIST 2510, Chapter 11, we'll look at publishing to the web. So in this chapter, you're going to be guided through the publishing your sites online. Now, most of our websites will use as FTP, but keep in mind RDS and local network connections are also something that could be common. The defining a remote site is an optional lab. So this lab is optional. But while it is optional, you must read the material, be familiar with the contents. Most web hosting companies will provide all this information when the account is created. Now, if you're using a company hosted site, your IT manager will provide that information. Now, in some cases, companies use a staging server to prevent direct access to the company's online content. The put and get operations, they always overwrite the files at the destinations. So you need to be especially careful not to get a file from a server that will override a newer version on the local site. The server may be located in a remote location in a different time zone, and that's when the files are posted to that server. The creation time of that file may be localized. You also need to be aware that older files on the server may actually appear to be newer than the ones that are on the local computer. It's recommended that local files be backed up separately to prevent data loss. Most types of web files are very small, and only the images and videos will take up a lot of disk space. When you're developing a new site for an existing server, you'll not be able to upload files using the URL in the setup dialog. If you do, you could accidentally overwrite the files in the existing server. So in that case, the new internet service provider will give you a numeric IP address that you can use instead. Now, although the new server will eventually use the same URL, the IP address of the two sites will always be different from one another. Also remember that username and passwords can be case sensitive. So when you're entering the server specification, the root directory can often be left blank. Most FTP logins will automatically target the public folder. That's not always the case though. Testing servers are the next best thing to having a live server. Test server should be able to emulate the behaviors of all web applications on your site. That's including your database connections if you have any. There are free versions available both for the Windows and Mac computers that you can install locally. In some cases, you may not want or be able to upload sensitive content to the internet before you're able to take it live. So you can use a testing server to make sure that everything works before revealing it to the public. And you see on the screen, I have included a link to a couple of different testing servers. The one I personally use is the WAMP server. Now, cloaking is a technique used to set specific files aside so they're ignored by automatic FTP operations. Dreamweaver allows you to cloak individual files and folders. Some folders and files may not need to be uploaded to the server. These include things such as a template, resources, and library items. You should be aware that some items may actually be different on a remote server and should not be updated. This is especially true when data connection files, when the connection scripts on the local computer are not the same as the scripts for the server. Other file types that should be omitted are ones that are not typically supported by the web browsers. These include files such as TIST, Photoshop files, PSDs, Word documents, spreadsheets, as well as any material that may contain private or sensitive data. Now, sometimes when designers have multiple clients, they may want to save their clients' files all in one folder. In that case, you may want to add all the extensions for any non-web files in this field. There are other file extensions you can also enter, like Excel or Access, Illustrator, InDesign file types as well. Now, in most cases, you will never want to upload certain resource files to a web server, and by doing so would make them prone for theft or to be exploited. Now, some people are not worried about this. They'll use the web server as a backup storage. Keep in mind that any files that are stored on the web server can be accessed by site visitors as well as hackers. So sensitive material content should not be uploaded if you're concerned that it may be seen by the public. Also, when you're cloaking the files, you should add any extensions you may be using as source files and stored within the site folder. So in this book, so far in this course, you've created a variety of pages for your final website, but you have not created the site homepage. So in the wrapping things up exercise, you're going to create one last page and save it as the site homepage. In here, you'll learn that the home pages can have various names. A lot of times they're rarely called home. Now, you should also go through the process of performing some final checks on the pages in your site. These include the code validation, spell checking, and your site-wide link checking. Now, on active sites, links get broken or go out of date from time to time. This is one of the parts of web design is the ongoing maintenance. So you should check links on a regular basis, especially ones that point to resources you do not control or host. So if you've got an external link going to another site, make sure you check that periodically to make sure that the link still is active and still works. These external URLs are called backlinks. Now, Google and other search engines, they have, and even third-party services, they have a variety of tools you can use to find broken backlinks. Also, as you create the homepage, keep in mind that moving content from one file to another is easier in design view or code view, but you must be in the same view in both the source and the target destination when copying and pasting. Pasting content works differently in Dreamweaver views when the element is selected. So in live view, if an element is selected, the pasted content is inserted after the selection. In design and code views, the pasted content replaces the selection. Also, keep in mind that the more you do these tasks, the more likely you are to forget a step. So it's a good idea to create a checklist to remind you of all the tasks you should perform before uploading a new page or site. So this is something that's going to be especially important with new websites. There may be dozens of support files and resources that need to be uploaded before that site will work properly. Now, in some cases, these support resources will not be identified by Dreamweaver when you put a file, when you send the file to the server. Another issue that can cause embarrassment is that the newly created web page may have files loaded in the domain by the web host. This placeholder content usually displays a temporary home page until you upload your own pages. You do need to be aware that web servers are often set up to honor several different home page names and extensions, and it's depending on the server technology. So you want to make sure that you name your own in a way that's compatible to that technology. Another section that was optional is the putting your site online. This is not something that is required for the lab. We're not publishing the site, but you can use a test server if you so choose to host your site. So by this time, your site is completed. It's ready to be published. Most, if not all, of the structure of the local and remote sites will be identical once that site is published. Now, that's the exception is going to be the cloaked files and folders. Once again, we are not publishing our website, but you can upload it to a test server. Now, once the site is published, though, you want to make sure that you go back and confirm that all the files and resources that are needed for that site and make sure they have all been uploaded. You also need to check and test all interactive elements and make sure they function as expected. This is something, once again, that is an ongoing process to check your links, check your resources. Now, keep in mind that any file that is uploaded or downloaded will automatically overwrite any version of the same file at that destination. So you have to be careful, and you want to make sure that you have the correct file selected. There's no undo function if you overwrite the wrong file. The entire site should be backed up to a separate folder in case something does go wrong that you can restore from your backup. Now, you may run into another issue that where some web servers that are Unix or Linux are case sensitive. So that means that how a file name is capitalized will be important. So if you see a file on your computer that's named index.html with a capital I, or one in the server that's named index.html and it's got a lowercase I, those two files are going to be treated as different files. And they can both live in the same folder simultaneously. So your links can actually take you to the wrong index.html file. Also, be aware that hyperlinks that use the wrong case will not function and no page will load. So you can avoid these issues by standardizing the naming of all web assets using all lowercase letters. Also, if you're confused when working in the file panel as to which pane you should work in and what happens when you click into get and put, and it really doesn't matter whether you use the local remote pane of the files panel when clicking these buttons. Put is always going to upload to the remote. Get always downloads to the local. The synchronizing local and remote sites. This exercise details the steps needed to synchronize the local and remote sites. Now, synchronization is a good technique to use when working with multiple designers or developers on one site. Some teams will work with the check-in, check-out feature of Dreamweaver. That's to ensure that the users are always working with the most current version of every file and they don't work on the same file at the same time. So what this is, the check-in, check-out, is each worker should turn on the check-in, check-out in the server setup dialog, then synchronize the entire site to get and put the latest version of each file. So when a user is ready to work on a file, they should check it out. This will notify all other users that the file is being edited. You want to make sure that you just remember to check the file back in when you're finished with it. And this is really cuts down on teams working on the same page, the same file, and doing multiple changes to that file. Also, something that it's not mentioned within this lesson, but professional developers use other methods to work together without creating major conflicts or overriding each other's work. Now you can go out and research services like Git and Bitbucket to see how these services function and how they're used within various companies as well as the industry as a whole. So support for Git version control system was added to Dreamweaver in a previous release of the software. You want to make sure that you understand the difference between the synchronized icon and the refresh icon. The synchronized icon looks similar to the refresh icon, but it is located on the upper right side of the file panel, as you can see in the screenshot on the screen, where the refresh will be located on the bottom of the panel. Now, the synchronized function does not compare cloaked files or folders.